Welcome back, folks. We're here on MSP Confidential. Always a pleasure to be joining you. We're here every Friday on New Pacific, unless we're not. Travel and all those things occasionally get in the way of us being able to do this. I have a great pleasure, and I say this not as a facetious insult, but more because this is a guy that has been so in demand by the industry and so difficult to pin down that it's taken literally over 2 years to get him onto the podcast. I'd like to welcome Ryan Walsh onto the show. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, my man. First of all, a public apology for how difficult it's been for us to get together and riff together and connect. And so my apologies. There is an excuse. Everybody's busy, so I appreciate your patience with me.
No, it's good, man. I'm going to put this on public record because I say this kind of to you in passing whenever I get to see you for the 10 seconds that we chat every time we're at an event together. But of all the people I've met in the channel for all these years, and I've been around this block a couple times now, you always stand out as one of the people that has been incredibly supportive and a champion of my career, of the things that I'm doing. So I just want to say thank you publicly because you've made a big difference in how I show up in the channel. And it's because you've been setting a great example for me. So from the heart, thank you, buddy.
Well, thank you. And my comments are genuine, and I hope you know that. I really appreciate how you're always giving back, and you stood out to me for that. And more importantly, I think, for our community, to get together as we're moving around and we're doing a bunch of things to be real and talk about life and talk about our families and talk about, a broader picture than just business. That's personally what I always wanted to be a part of, and coming from the basement days of Pax8, how we show up as, as a group, has always mattered to me. And
Yeah.
and so I feel very fortunate that we're in a market and a community that values that personal connection. And so anyway, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's kind of with that lens that I want to get into a number of things today, not the
Yeah.
least of which is, the hypergrowth Pax8 has experienced. And maybe there's a hindsight here because they say, the overnight success took 15 years. and
That's true.
a- and I think people often joke about this. Everybody wants to get a blueprint of the results, but not necessarily the work that was put into the results. And so I want to ask you, as you sometimes maybe stop to take a breath in, smell the roses, so to speak. What kind of things do you think back now on this? What is it, about a 10-year journey with Pax8 so far?
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit longer. We started in June of 2012.
Yeah.
Now,
So
a lot of people didn't see us in those days. So, gosh, I can't believe it. It's over 13. But for the first couple of years, we were fueled by what we believed and we were motivated to go build. But it took us a little bit, like any startup, where you're just like, all right, for your first phase, you're just going to go make sure nobody else has done this, and then you're going to go validate with those that you'll interact with. And so for me, that meant talking to partners and talking to vendors about what we were trying to do,
yeah,
or we had a vision to do, and if they liked it. Now, if we didn't have enough people say, I like what you're doing, or there's a need for that, then we would have said, okay, we gave it a shot. In fact, when I think about it, I think that I wasn't very smart about it because we literally jumped off of, where I was, um, which was with McAfee. McAfee bought MX
it's
Logic,
logic.
and
Yeah.
then Intel bought McAfee. And I left because we wanted to go do this. And so if we had started within a few months and realized the need wasn't there, then it was like, okay, now what are you going to do? But I think the thing that's relevant for anybody who's thinking about starting something, um, is, I talked to John Street, who was, our CEO in the beginning, and a serial one at that. And I was struggling, like, wondering if I should do this or not. And he said, look, the difference between me and everybody else who talked about it is I jumped in the pool and I have no regrets. And I thought, you know what? I will regret it if I don't do it.
Yeah.
So if it fails in 3 months, then I'll say to myself, or a year or whatever, I was like, I needed to go do it and not have that regret in my life.
Yeah, I feel like that's heavily influenced also by the seasons of our life, to some extent. The risk appetite that we have at a certain timeline in life. Would you today, 12, 13 years ago, maybe your risk appetite was a little bit different. Do you often stop to think about whether you'd repeat the same sort of risk and jumping into the pool type of thing, or I mean, maybe as a seasoned executive of all these experiences in the past, maybe you're double down on that risk taking. But I'm curious, sort of what goes through your mind on that.
No, that's a great question. I think that I kid around because at Pax8, we introduce ourselves, and part of that introduction is a weird or interesting fact. And for me, that was sharing that I've torn both my Achilles tendons, but I've repurposed those scars to say, we started out of a basement and I have the scars to prove it. Now you might think when I say that you're like, yeah, no, you wouldn't do it again. You would say, man, that was a long road, or that was hard and I thought it was going to kill me.
Mm,
Which, there are points where, you know, many of us from the beginning were saying that to each other, like, man, this is tough. But I absolutely would do it again. It's like, I think for me, a big part of it is, and I think you move this way too, is like when you feel like you feel a calling or a purpose. Purpose is a
mm,
huge driver. And I think that for me is why I would do it again, because the purpose of doing something, making a difference, saying I gave it a shot because I wanted to, that didn't leave my building and still doesn't. And fortunately, PAX8 has been, it's been growing, but every year the growth is, led to new things and new climbs that we want to tackle. And I really enjoy it. I really love what I'm doing.
mm. I heard a great expression the other day that the purpose in life, and this is one of those existential questions, right? What is purpose of life? But I heard this great definition. The purpose of life is to find the heaviest weight you can carry and then carry it. And I
Yeah.
thought that was so deep once I started thinking about it. But you mentioned you tore both of your Achilles heels. Was that lifting digital products onto the shelves of your new marketplace, or was that basketball related? Because
Absolutely. Actually, one of them was basketball. I was defending, a 2-on-1 very well until they crossed the basketball in front of me and I went to steal it, and then that was one, and then the other one was racquetball.
oh boy. Yeah. Well, let me maybe to overuse metaphors, because why not? Let me get into
Why
a bit
not?
of the basketball theme a bit, because I know you're passionate about this. Obviously, your family is steeped in basketball, and I feel like it's not until we start to really think about the influences that we've had, or how we show up, that it starts to manifest. What things really shaped us in the early parts of our lives, and I'm curious, you sort of, if you've thought about what sort of undeniable things came from a bit of this basketball context inside of your home growing up. And I know teamwork is a big one for you. You talk about this quite often, but I'm sure there's a couple of other things you've started to notice parallels.
Well, Luis, this is something that it is personal to me, because coming from a basketball family, it's I like, if I'm trying to describe the way I'm wired, if somebody wants to know, well, who am I talking to? My persona is one of a point guard. And it's because I grew up in a family where my dad was a coach. And the thing I took away from that, and I also happen to have, there's five of us kids in the family. So I have one brother and three sisters. And so we're all different. And the thing I noticed, being the son of a basketball coach, is that a basketball team wins by having five different roles play together to pursue a purpose. And that I feel like that reflects how like to uh, I like to work. I like to do sports. It's, with others, but not, like we're all doing the same thing. It's more powerful to me to, each role comes together to pursue, winning.
Mhm.
And so my mantra is we before me, and that's how teams win. Like when you have selfishness, like if you see in a court, if you had a great shooter is just like hogging the ball, they're shooting all the time, despite the fact they're being double teamed. Well, that team's going to lose. And I coached my sons too, and so these are great life lessons. They applied to me not only in sport but also how I think about what Pax8's doing.
Yeah.
And so the guidance there is just, the power of a we before me mentality. And I think that really applies um, to me in my philosophy, but also Pax8, because Pax8, if you remember, when we were talking, we got started, we knew that because we started helping partners get into this cloud recurring revenue business. And we knew that unlike on-premise software or hardware appliances, um, any point along the cloud buying journey could trip up an experience for a partner, which meant that while we're a sales culture, we're definitely out front there. Um, we knew that once you sold it, you had to deliver it, provision it quickly. You needed to set it up properly. You needed to be there to provide support. You had to make sure that the bill was right and rinse and repeat. So anybody along that journey could have tripped up a bad experience for a partner. And so I think we learned very early here that we needed each other to win. And that
Yeah.
meant the frontline tech, it meant the finance department managing the bill and the vendor team that interacts with all the vendors that are on our product catalog. So I think we gained a real physical sense of what that means. And for me, it was kind of cool because I take that philosophy out there in
Yeah.
life.
Well, maybe something that is not as specific and maybe has a little bit more abstractness to it
Yeah.
is the strategy role, actually, and
Yeah.
I sometimes joke about this, and I don't say this to demean or make fun or anything, but sometimes I have conversations where saying that you're the strategist of anything is like the SaaS equivalent of being put out to pasture to some extent. And so that's not what I'm saying about you. I know you're a deep thinker, and you're always talking to partners. You're always trying to connect these bigger dots on the big scheme of things. But I'm curious to ask you, what does because you were COO for a while too at Pax8.
Yeah.
What does the strategy role involve today, and where do you get the most fulfillment from what you're doing?
Yeah, that's great. I'm just going to write that down so I can answer it all. Um, when I started, I fashioned myself to be the Swiss Army knife. Somebody likes to do a lot of different things, and that's kind of how my career had progressed. I started in consulting as a system integrator at Deloitte, and we focused on solving business problems with technology. So I sat in the middle, and I felt very comfortable um, sitting in the middle. And then I went over to on the vendor side, where I was working with the product groups and the pro services groups. Again, trying to deliver a service, utilizing the technology and the product that you had. So when I started at Pax8, I focused on finding the vendors that would go into the product. And so at that time, um, I had different titles, starting with chief channel officer. So that one that made most sense because the channel meant partners and vendors. So we kind of kept that. And then some people are like, well, what does that really mean? The same thing have applied to a chief channel officer to a chief strategy officer. So we're like, all right, we're changing that to a chief product officer. So we did that for a little bit. And that added some clarity, but then, as soon as we like Scott Chasen, and this is, Scott coming in first as the chief technology officer and then moving and evolving into our CEO. He was a technologist. He's a visionary that is second to none from my opinion because he was a CTO at MX Logic. And so John Street, who he was a CEO of MX Logic, Scott was a CTO there, and I work with them as well on the product side and the pro services side. So when if you take that experience and I held the seat of COO. It was an interim role until we brought somebody in to do that. But then after that, when we were talking about, okay, do you go back to the channel role or how do you want to shape this? What became relevant and important. And as a Swiss Army knife, I've been focusing on where is your need. And so Scott had the vision down. And so in talking with now our president and chief commerce officer, Nick Hetty, we're talking about, look, we need somebody to be focusing on and help galvanize our strategy going forward. That doesn't mean they come to me as a soothsayer to say this is where it's going to
Mm,
go. That's really Scott's role. For me, the sitting in the union of tech and business, that really meant like what's on the horizon as far as how you will grow. And we refer to that as like Horizon One. We're kind of living in that right now. Horizon Two, you might be in the 2 to 3 years out. Horizon Three is, 3 to 5. And so who's going to be looking at all the things that you could do and try and prioritize those things? And that was something that I felt passionate about um, because I enjoy that business role. And then the other part of it is once you pick and you work together to figure out what you're going to do to add into or grab the growth that you need, then galvanize and bring everybody together and orchestrate that, communicate that where you're going. And I felt pretty confident in that.
yeah. Well, let me maybe take you further back a little. And MX Logic was maybe a bit of your first exposure to the channel and
Yeah.
MSPs and this partner network effectively. So maybe the question is more relevant to your early BAMX Logic days. But what I wanted to ask you is if there was something in the early days of Pax8 or MX Logic that you believed about MSPs or the customer that you're trying to build for that maybe has changed or shifted over the years, something that you no longer believe about that customer, about the MSP. And this is an interesting question to think about because I think in life we have all these beliefs that maybe we start to loosen the grip on over time because if we do get curious, then we also question our own beliefs to some extent. And I'm curious sort of where you sit in that spectrum of
Yeah,
questioning the
no,
things
I
that.
I embrace one thing, and it's also a behavior that we really promote here, which is, to be an open, light up learning is what we would refer to it. So like to be open and curious is, I think that was a part of our success in getting out of the basement and growing is to listen to partners. And so I think because of my approach to that listening, and an example of that would be in the early days, it might have been myself and Nick Hetty up on stage talking about what Pax8 was going to do and why and what was happening. And we get off the stage. And so answering the question, or what are you doing and how can you help me? We would go to the booth and we would invite partners to the booth or vendors to the booth, and we'd have a conversation. And that's where we shaped our strategy a lot because we would say, well, this is what we're doing. And sometimes partners honest with us saying, well, that's not my most important problem. So we got used to adapting and learning and pivoting a lot. And I believed in that because uh, there's a book that really shaped me called Innovator's Dilemma. And the whole concept was how do you take advantage of disruptive technologies and succeed against, bigger or more established competitors who have more capital, they have more brand awareness, they have more resources. How do you win? And the short answer to that question was when you have a new market that's adapting or responding to a disruptive technology, the way you win is you light up learning. You follow where that market wants to be, and you bring a little bit of your own vision about that. And so we did. We had an idea that there had to be a better way to buy, manage, and sell cloud services. That's what motivated us. And so, but once we got off stage, we're like, hey, what does this make sense? Does it not? I mean, Craig Donovan, one of the things where we learned was we started doing PSA integrations. And the first time we did it, um, Craig went out there and said, okay, yeah, we've got it. This is all done. And partners are like, yeah, that's not very interesting or it's not very differentiated. And he's like, what do you mean? We're all excited about this. And they told him. And so he listened and he took that back to our shop. And we had version 2 that was much better. And it addressed some of the things we didn't know. but we learned because we asked. So when you ask the question, like, what belief did I have that no longer applies? I'll tell you one thing that it's really standing out, especially right now. And that is when we started Pax8, we felt like we were behind because, as context, MX Logic was an email security based solution in the cloud. And so we had been living in the cloud for a long time. And so when we started Pax8, we thought there's got to be a better way to help partners buy, sell, and manage multiple cloud products. And when we started, we're like, man, we're behind. In fact, the first few days or first few months for me was searching to see if somebody had cracked the code. And
Mm,
so I realized not only did it not crack the code, when we started talking to people about what we were doing, and we referred to ourselves as a cloud commerce marketplace, we realized that, okay, the market isn't, we're not behind per se. In fact, we need to help more. And so having time to digest what cloud meant was something that we got patient around and structured our services around so that we could help partners go fast and build a cloud practice. So my belief at that time was, okay, maybe the market doesn't move as fast as we think it will. That has changed with AI
yeah.
and an agentic future, and I believe that firmly. So that's something that I'm talking about a lot right now, which is you don't have time. This is so different that that's a belief I don't hold anymore. In fact, I'm actually raising a level of urgency around this to say, I don't think you have time. I know that you don't have time. And so don't wait. Even if you're not sure about how to do this, get in the game. Start small,
Sure.
uh, ship fast, and do this now. And I
Yeah.
study it. I study that. And that's the other thing, I guess I'll just finish off on the strategy question you asked. I studied from the very beginning the market trends. GTIA has great research. I studied it all just to see like where's everybody at? Where's the market going? And so this is why I have a lot of passion about this because a lot of times we think something might happen, and it's good to get third party perspective to say, do you believe this is going to stay where we think it is? And so I use that as a gauge to sort of temper our own sense of what will happen. But this has changed for me. I don't think the time is there anymore, and I'm talking about it a lot.
Yeah, I wanted to maybe double click a bit on a bit of the evolution of the vision because you talked a bit about, the early thesis being just helping people better transact in the cloud on their products and services and such. And I think today, if you were to look at why an MSP comes on board with Pax8, and maybe pre-AI, because I think AI is maybe changing the game for everybody, but um, let's take the context of an MSP that wants to is just hit the $2 million mark in revenue, for example, and they want to grow quickly to $5 million. Do you think the vision has shifted? The thing that is the key driver for that MSP to become part of the Pax8 ecosystem is different than just transacting on products or services, or is it other things like Academy and the peer groups and some of the other ecosystem parts that are not necessarily the marketplace itself? But give me a bit of your sense of the
Yeah,
evolution of the vision.
yeah, yeah. The vision early on in unique ways as we listened and talked to partners about the services that we were trying to bring as a cloud commerce marketplace is what we called it. Um, we did not have a vision that some technology-based um, companies had for the channel. We did not believe that if you just built a platform unattended with people who were there to help, that you would grow. And so growth was really the driver. It's like, how do you take advantage? We took that, there had to be a better way. We want to help partners take advantage of this. And when we do that, partners win, we win, vendors win. So it was a great value prop. But we learned, and in a way, I'll tell you, Louis, I didn't really appreciate how important enablement was going to be for
Mm.
this journey. That part of the recipe has become only more important. And you might have thought, and we did a little bit, we're like, hey, we actually had a model that said, we're going to be here to help you. So in the early days, we would wear flight suits because we wanted to convey we're going to be your wingman or your wingwoman. So we'll be there by your side. So we never had a vision that you would just show up. There's no people in the marketplace. Um, there's just technology. Now we're product led because Scott and his chief product officer, Libby McElhaney, they're just amazing. And they have a amazing product led growth vision. But from the beginning and still now with that vision, even with the advanced use of agents to help us all serve these small and medium-sized businesses, enablement has been such a part of our go-to-market. And I don't see that going away. In fact, you've come to our Beyond events, you know that it's education heavy. It's designed so that we're not just showing up with vendor product commercials. It's like how do you take advantage of learning more about security or AI, data privacy, data protection? And then we want the community to talk to each other. So we have a lot of sessions where you have panels of partners saying, well, here's what it meant to me. And that goes back to our early days. We had something, and we still do, called mission briefings, where it was just a day. And think of it like it would be like a 1 day version of Beyond, where we're going to invite partners to come in. We're going to provide some education about different things. Some of it is to demonstrate a product that could go to your tech stack. But other parts were like, let's talk about security. Let's talk about Microsoft incentives and how to get them. It was broader than just
Yeah.
just selling products. And I think that partners realized that we meant it. And we said, we're here to help you. We're here to ride shotgun and answer questions and do things to help you become successful. And so that part of the recipe is still with us and is stronger since we did things like acquire C-level. So they had a very strong MSP centered coaching practice, consulting practice. And so we incorporated that and their knowledge and their learning into our academy. And we've hired some amazing former MSP folks who helped us shape security. Matt Lee helped us, now build out our AI playbook. Chance Weaver. There are a lot of people who, came from the industry that represent it, and I think that's a part of the go-to-market, the recipe. So that didn't change. It actually became more important.
Yeah, I appreciate that about you guys for sure. And I've been a Pax8 partner back with my old MSP, and I was one of the early Canadian partners. In fact, I often tell this funny story that there was some billing challenges with the credit card charges back then.
Yeah.
And I remember I got a random call from a couple of the Ryans because there's like at least
You got
200
15 of
Ryans at Pax8, and and it was like, hey, what's been your experience? And I remember complaining a little bit about this, credit card thing is really challenging, this billing thing. And she's like, yeah, we're having some problems with our credit card provider. And like a good consultant back then, I had referral agreements with everybody under the sun, including a credit card merchant. And I said, well, do you guys need a referral to like a proper credit card people? And they said, yeah, we'll take it. And so I remember Pax8 actually went and signed up with these guys. They solved the problem for Pax8 until you moved to Stripe years later. But I think the silver lining was that I made a commission from Pax8's growth over all those years on this
I
credit card
didn't
merchant
know.
because I made an introduction. So I always think back to that as a funny story.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, you kind of hinted a bit at the urgency with this AI thing and the need to
Yeah.
to get moving. And I want to maybe do a reality check with you on this because the last couple weeks there's been some reports. Microsoft pulling back on some of the sales targets for Copilot for AI stuff and so on. And so I wonder if you guys have been talking a little bit about this and if this is what the hype cycle crashing looks like potentially, and what if anything is maybe shifting about the MIP or the Managed Intelligence Provider playbook strategy or the urgency, if anything. Curious,
Yeah.
what's kind of crossing around the desk so
Well,
far.
this is something that, again, as I mentioned, I look at and I try and stay on top of trends that affect the industry. And this concept, a pullback or a bubble busting because the benefit was not realized. Um, I have an opinion about that. And It's informed from my own experience. Um, in my early system integrator consulting days, we fashioned it re-engineering consulting. So it wasn't like
Yeah.
incremental improvement. It was like change your business way of working. And the way that and the successful path through that was to really understand what you were trying to achieve as, as a part of a company's, 2, 3, 5-year plan. And so we locked on that. And we said, okay, based on that, where you want to go, what the opportunity is that you want, let's take a look at your processes. Let's take a look at your applications, your systems, um, and your skill sets. And, let's talk about how we get you there. And you would change things. So what I learned from that, and that my response to this, potential doubt about the promise of the technology, or is it ready yet, is I think that for those who lock in very specifically and clearly on the result they're trying to achieve, the outcome that they want, that's the difference maker. I see a lot of people aren't sure. I'm not sure where I point this. I'm not sure where to start. I'm not sure, what it is that will get a return for me. And if you're unclear, then I think that's the result you're going to get. The more clear you are, the more specific you are. And actually, there's a lot coming out. And Chance talks about this in his talks about how do you make this move. And he's, supporting the playbook and mapping it out in our programs is it's about being very specific. And it goes back to something I said before is start small, ship fast. And he'll give some examples. Like if you try and bite off a too big of a project, you're probably going to fail. You're not going to realize the potential there. There's
Yeah.
a lot written that says, early users, early small businesses using AI are getting 40% um, productivity improvements within 90 days. When I hear that, I hear somebody who knew what they were trying to target. And we have a lot of examples of that. And I personally, I spent some time in Australia and talked to a lot of partners in Australia, in Europe, and in the US. And that theme runs consistent. We were talking to some early partners who incorporated AI into their services, and there was a theme there. They weren't boiling the ocean, they were very specific. One example is we're talking to a construction company who bids out work, and they have a process where they submit a CAD drawing is submitted, and they have to do a statement of work based on the CAD drawing. It took 3 weeks. They applied AI to it and did that within the construct of 4 hours.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden they got faster in terms of the return. They increased their adoption rate, and it was this narrow process. They're like, okay, look, here's where it's manual. Let's apply the technology to make sure that we can turn that statement of work around based on the CAD drawing, and that's where they were winning. And you see example after example like that. Um, and so that's my opinion is that that bubble only, I think that bubble is applying to those that aren't sure where they're going with the result that they want. And those that counter that argument are the ones that have been very intentional and they've discovered the right workflow to start with.
I had Dan Mitchell on the podcast last week, Canadian MSP. He actually launched MIP Global, an AI forward MSP. And one of the things we talked about a little bit was how much, how different the go to market is in
Yeah.
this AI forward type of thing, because it's almost not about the tech and the AI at all. It's actually in his purview a little bit more about, or a lot more about the change leadership and the buy-in and the enablement and the training and the process discovery and all these things that are interesting to think about from a deepening of the relationship. And ScalePad's in the customer success category squarely right now, and it's one of the things that we are spending so much time talking about is like leading change, driving enablement, driving adoption, and all these things that are critical to NDR. The figure of NDR is becoming really important, net dollar retention for MSPs. And I was curious to ask you a couple things. The first is Pax8 seems to have always led in their marketing efforts with how many partners you're supporting. And I feel like AI is going to maybe create this fork in the road where the number of partners is not as important as maybe the depth of relationship that you have with fewer partners to some extent. And so, like, is Pax8 talking about, hey, we're happy if we don't have any partner count growth, but we'd love to see their spend increasing across all these different opportunities that exist, not only AI, but obviously, cybersecurity keeps growing and so on. Just curious your view on NDR and what it's driven by.
Yeah, it's a great question that I think we would have a conversation with a partner about their customers in the same way. Do you have the right customers? Have you thought about that alignment between what you do and what customers align to that? So rationalizing the ideal customer profile, we've done that too. Like if you come to Pax8 and you don't need all the services that we offer, then maybe we're not the right one for you. And in that context, you know, um, accepting the fact that you might lose a partner because of that is okay, because it really centers around will be who you are and find those that want what you are. So I think that rationalizing your customer base can be a good thing, and that could result for some people in a reduction in your customers, but a deepening in the commitment, the engagement, the alignment, the growth that overcomes that loss. We happen to believe, I temper that by saying we believe that it's it's a really big market. So let's just say we say there could be customers or partners that don't align or don't need all that we do. And in those cases, having that mean that they won't stay with us is acceptable. So that our expectations are aligned. But with that said, one thing that's changed, I should have answered this in your one of your questions about what's changed in the beginning than now is we took a common approach to bringing everybody into the cloud, a very common recipe. What we've learned now is that is that we need to meet partners where they are, and our programs need to reflect that. And so that's been a change for us. We might have said in the beginning, all of you go through the same journey with us. Now we don't do that anymore. In fact, you'll see that we refer to these programs as guided growth. And
Yeah.
the way that it works is instead of like what we might have done in the past when we started growing was, hey, we just added this new vendor. Let me tell you about that vendor and their product. Now what we do is we take content areas, like security or AI, and say we want to educate you about that. And then after that, you can make some decisions about what products fit in your stack. But it's centered on, educating you around that content area. But even before then, what we do is we do an assessment because, if you think about AI and the readiness for each firm, it varies. And some people
Yeah.
are really advanced, like Dan, and they're ready for it. And others are like, I'm just getting started. I'm just trying to get my head around it. And so we do an assessment so that we can figure out exactly where you are. And we track that. Like we track like how many are just getting started, how many need to go straight to the 201 class or the 301 class, because you're really deep. And just to put this in perspective, that education um, has been informed by in the case of AI, is like if you say, well, where did you get your insights? Did you just build it yourself? It's like, no, we built it with our working groups of partners. So whether we hired somebody like a Matt Lee who can guide us on his security insights, we would do that. But we also have working groups and advisory councils and in particular, we have an AI working group, and that group really shaped um, and helped us shape that content. And Chance is somebody that's going to further shape it with us. Um, but that allows us to say, okay, we've got over 100 courses. Now, you don't have to take them all, but when you take the
Sure.
assessment, we kind of point you to where we think your needs are.
Mm.
And the other thing that's cool about this is it might have been a little bit more product technical oriented. Now those courses are broken into strategy, operations, go to market, technical. So if you
Yeah.
have a technician, you're like that person needs to learn a little bit more about data governance in the construct of AI. But more and more, what we're hearing is what you referenced is we're having a go-to-market conversation. And you'll hear Rob Ray talk about this. So many partners don't know how to have a conversation with their customers about, AI in particular. So that's a course. Like let's meet them where they are. Now, eventually you'll pick a product that goes into your stack, but you need to know how to talk about it first. So
Yeah.
go to market. And there's operational courses, like how do you increase your operational maturity? So that we've changed there. And I think definitely for the better, so that we can kind of meet partners where they are. I think what that does, Luis, is that it allows us to serve more partners. So instead of you constrict your partner base and just kind of serve those that you serve, this allows us to kind of meet partners where they are. So we don't have to force one size, one path to everybody. And I think that's been well received.
Yeah. Well, one of the, I guess, a thesis I have, and this kind of came out a bit in talking with Dan last week, is that not every MSP is necessarily going to be able to lean into that true consulting, process mapping, training, enablement, all these things that are required, I think, of a deep AI engagement or many other engagements for that matter.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've had this thesis that it's going to throw a bunch of MSPs squarely back into this VAR type of model where they're just waiting for a
Hmm.
customer to raise their hand. They're going to go look to see if there's a product on the shelf they can buy that they can get. And I think this is where, interestingly, where more marketplaces are born. This is where like a pro services marketplace, specifically around AI enablement, is born. It's the same thing that happened with MSSPs and MSPs partnering on deeper cybersecurity capabilities because
Yeah.
there's a maturity model to all these things. And so I haven't really heard people talking about a AI maturity model just yet, and what capacity you really have at what size of MSP. It's kind of so heavily role based and influenced by that. But I'm curious, as this is on your mind as an enablement piece, that you could manage with an MSP as they go to market to help them actually deliver on the enablement and training and all these things. And you don't have to spill the beans if this is some secretive lab project you're working on. But I thought I'd ask if it's been on your mind.
It's definitely been on our mind. We do have an AI lab group that is working with, partners like Dan, um, to take advantage of what you're talking about. I've personally always believed in the power of what you're talking about, which is if you have a specialty, and I promote it, that it is a bias of mine, that I would say, like, if you don't own a niche, own a niche or many niches that go together so that you can, if there's an RFP, you're going to be in the top one, two, or three because you're known for something. People can orient around what you know. And I think that, within an agentic AI future, it's going to leverage opportunity around there quite a bit,
Yeah.
to be very specific. But what you're describing, we want to support in two ways. One way is, and this is why when we started talking about, an agentic future, now we're specifically talking about AI agents and how does that add to your stack? Are you ready for that? We produced the AI inflection point, the agentic inflection point report. So just to get attention. And then following that, we built a MIP playbook. Now that MIP playbook is intended to sort of peel this back a little bit and tell me how I would get started.
The pragmatism.
And yeah, and I don't know if you and I talked about this, but we lived in this world early in our journey. And the example was when we brought on Microsoft and specifically Azure, um, we set up a lab environment where we invited partners to go to a Microsoft office and they were going to teach our partners about Azure and how to build an Azure practice and get oriented around it. And then they had a business track and they had a tech track. Both could come in, and we brought all these partners in, and they finished it and we're just like, great, are you ready to go? And they said, we don't know where to start.
Mm.
We know enough to know that we don't know where to start. We can do anything, but what do you recommend? And so at that time, we built what we called was a flight plan, which is, okay, well, there's multiple ways to do it, but if you want us to recommend a pretty predictable path, we'll do that for you. And we did. And so we built a 90, 120-day plan. Like, here's one way you could do it. And some of that was real practical. Like, one of the first things we want you to do is we're going to show you how to quote it. And another thing we want you to do is take one of your own workflows and put it in Azure so you get your own experience with this. It was things like that, very practical. We took the same approach to the MIP playbook, the MIP playbook. And so it'll go through and it answers the question, well, how would you start? And so there's like 5 plays in there. Discover, buy, build, sell, manage. It starts with discover. And so we break it down. It's like, what do you mean? Oh, you discover the problem. No, a little bit more than that. Like, discover workflows, have a use case workshop with your client. These are multiple ways that you can get started. So if you don't feel like you've got all the recipe figured out, we've sort of broken it down. You can kind of pick the one that you think makes more sense to you and your clients. And so we address what you're saying by building out a playbook. And obviously we have the AI guided growth that has courses that you can use. But I do believe we need to support what you're talking about, partnering. So that's something that is on our roadmap that we will address. We need to go through the journey of adding the agent store, which we're right now working with design partners and putting that together. We announced it in Amsterdam. And so we're going to be going GA with that in the first half of next year. And so that'll be the starting point where we add and incorporate an agent store with partners. I think that we're going to hear from those that are further down the road and how they can help other partners. And we want to be able to support that.
Yeah. I love it, man. I think the work that you guys are doing is awesome. I think the engagement you're getting from your partners is awesome. I've had the privilege of attending the last several Beyond conferences, and I see the momentum, which is it's really an interesting thing to experience and see being manifested, and people just kind of jump in and to experience that too. Well, I want to stop the shop talk for a second because
We could
I,
keep
I
going.
well,
This
I
is
don't.
awesome.
I just rarely get the chance to just ask you questions, and I know you've got such a wealth of lived experiences and things that you've, and I know you think deeply about some of these things, and so I'm curious to
Yeah,
ask you a couple of things that are maybe a little more on the personal side.
sure.
And I'll start with I'm constantly reevaluating, the belief system. We kind of mentioned it earlier. And
Yeah.
we kind of hinted a bit at some of the business beliefs and so on, but I'm curious if there's things that you've challenged your own personal beliefs on in the last little while that you said, you know what, I don't believe in that anymore, and it could be anything. It's not necessarily a spiritual thing, but it could be, you know, the way that you show up, the way that you engage with people, the way that you lead a team. I'm curious what barriers you've broken down through your lens of experience.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'd like to ask you the same to get your your perspective on this. I think about this a lot. Um, I think the one of the things that what I've learned to respect more than ever is what I don't know and and how to work through that is I think it supports my belief in being open to learning. But a lot of times is, I thought as I would mature and have experiences as a leader that I'd have to know everything. And I've learned that there's more power in identifying what I don't know and then, working through that answer with others. I think it fits really well in the channel, but I wasn't always comfortable admitting that as I was trying to, learn more about my craft and my industry and the things that we were doing. It felt like I had to have all the answers. And what I've learned is that the belief that I had to is subsided to the way in which you get that answer. And it's coupled with one other thing that's personal. It is personal. And I've learned to embrace this more than anything, is that um, you hear this phrase, hey, it's not personal, it's just business. For me, and I know that John Street said this and others at Pax8, it's like for us, it's not just business, it's personal. And I think that's shaped by who we serve because our partners and our vendors, our community value that, but I'm wired that way. That
Yeah.
it is personal to me. And I think that when I really reflect on um, I reflect on the power of being genuine, right? If you believe in something, the power of your purpose, that is just something I've learned to appreciate more than anything. So when I have a conversation with somebody, a lot of, new to the workforce or new to the tech or new to the channel folks, they will ask, that a lot of times we might have a title conversation or compensation, title or comp conversation. I'm like, don't do that. Follow what you love. And one belief system that's changed for me, I thought like, man, if somebody looked at my career path, they said, this guy does not know what he wants to do. But what I've learned to embrace is it wasn't a career ladder, it was a career climbing wall. And I climbed over here, and then that didn't work, or I didn't like it anymore. So I climbed a little bit over here. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's the model. Follow your joy and don't think of it as a ladder. Follow what you love, and those dots will connect. I believe that firmly. So when I talk about like, hey, I want a title of this or I want a compensation of that, I'm like, well, what do you love to do? What don't you like to do? Let's start there. And
Yeah.
that's
Pull it
incorporated in
back.
my,
Yeah.
my system. Yeah. What about you? How do you answer that question for yourself?
It's something I ponder regularly, and in the last couple of weeks, and I'm gonna excuse my language. I had to go and preemptively change the age restriction on the YouTube stream for this to 18 plus because I knew I might bring this up because it's been on my mind a lot. But I came across this article on Substack by this woman, Ellen Schur, and the article is named "Aging Out of Fucks: The Neuroscience of Why You Suddenly Can't Pretend Anymore." And it was this interesting like awakening that it kind of put me through of helping me understand why I'm less interested in the performance theater, less interested in a bit of the keeping up with the Joneses, in a little bit of sort of the fitting into society and so on. And this is certainly like a factor of age, I feel like. And
Mhm.
just how much more real I desire my conversations to be, how much more real relationships I feel like they need to be. And so I that's something that is definitely, it feels like it wasn't exactly a switch that flipped, but it was certainly like this interesting awareness piece that suddenly I came into I've been enjoying a lot of like putting some understanding behind why do I feel this way all of a sudden about people. And what's interesting, and Dan Wensley, who was the CEO at SkillPad for a little while, 5 years, a little while. Uh,
Yeah, I love Dan.
I, I I knew him from the channel prior to that, but and he tells this story that I always feel happy. It makes me feel happy when he tells this story because he tells us the way he says is like, I didn't believe that you could be as nice as you appeared to be. He thought I was wearing a bit of this, mask, I suppose. And through working together for 5 years, I think it finally kind of clicked that was how I am, how I show up, and so it was very interesting to have it be recognized in that way because sometimes you're trying to intentionally show up a certain way, not for the people saying so necessarily, but it's because you feel sort of this need to do it a certain way. And so that's been the transition, I think, that's been interesting. But anyways, on Substack,
That's
uh,
awesome. That's awesome.
aging out of fucks, I highly recommend people go check this out because it will put a lot of like rubber to the road in terms of understanding some of the shift that we're going through. And what was interesting is like I was trying to think about how that maybe presents in customer success and how MSPs relate to their customers. And one of the things that's in the article is the piece of the time horizons, and the risk appetite. And I think this is true in life and in business. And you might have an organization that is fairly young and has a high risk appetite. Um, or low risk appetite rather, and then you might have a slightly older organization who's a little bit more preventive, and their risk appetite is not as high. And so this is an interesting thing to put into context in terms of meeting people where they are. And I think that you talked about this
Mm.
so well in terms of how Pax8 goes to market. And I think MSPs have long been maybe doomed a bit by the standardization context. Is like, we got to have our processes, the way we do things. Operational maturity requires everything's the same, and that kind of makes a bit of the client relationship suffer. So, anyways, from life back to shop talk, but I'll get back off of the shop talk and back into a question that I want to ask you about, because
Yeah.
uh, this is we all have good days and bad days, and I want to know. You've talked about climbing. You love living in Denver because of that, but what does Ryan's best day look like? You've maybe talked about chasing that impact. What do you love to do? Bring it.
Yeah, I tell you, a great day right now, because one of the things that um, I really see strategic and personal is we sort of rethought about our office and how that contributes to who we are as a company and how it contributes to the culture and the employee experience. And we refer to it as there's a team that's called the workplace experience. And the team really was intentional about like, how do we want this to work? And instead of a cube world or a temporary office world, what if we really thought about everything? And that applied to a number of our offices around the world, but Denver just recently. And it supported something that is makes for a perfect day for me because I really love what I'm doing with regards to how do we help, Pax8 take advantage of this massive opportunity with our community and, of partners and vendors. I live for that. Um, I think about that all the time. But while we're thinking about those strategic things, the thing that has always helped me shape my sense of whether our strategy is landing is by talking to people. And so the workplace experience has brought more people in than I've ever experienced since the pandemic. We were all had to be here. Um, but then we supported the hybrid, and I felt like we were losing something, some glue into the
Mm,
culture and the experience and what I am a part of. Going back to that basketball thing, that sense is I'm on the court with you guys. We're doing this together. Well, a little bit harder when it's remote. And so a perfect day for me right now is the collisions. We refer to them as collisions in the hall. So it's like after this call, I'm going to walk out and I'm going to go, down to the kitchen and the the power, the energy, the colliding with somebody across the company, different groups, is it makes for a perfect day. This blend between heads down thinking work, what's happening in the market, where should we go, what should we do, how do we bring this managed intelligence belief to our partners and to our vendors, but then go out and collide with somebody and say, how's your day? And what happened today? And I find that that connection is really the juice that makes us strong and able to serve our partners. And so a perfect day is I've got a blend of, strategic heads down thinking, conversations with people like you, who are dialed into the industry, and then, a personal connection with somebody
mm,
outside who's telling me about their day and then what they're working on and what's working and what's not. Um, then I would say after that, I would, if I could go I would walk my dogs, with my wife and then prepare for a hike in the mountains or a snowshoe. Man, and then come back, watch some hoops, check my fantasy football team. I mean, right now, both of these things are happening. Man, these are good days.
it's a perfect storm. Perfect
It's a
storm.
perfect storm. It is a perfect storm.
Yeah. So winter Ryan is really where the real Ryan comes out, I guess.
Well, there's a little bit of both in there because they'll say in Colorado that the summer is Colorado's best kept secret.
Yeah.
So I'm blended because, I snowboarded for a while. I'm really into snowshoeing right now because it's just incredible, peaceful, you know, fresh snow, and it's not heavy like, in in humid climates. So it's just peaceful. You can see things, be in the mountains. I love that. But I also like camping. So if you can do that in the summer, walk by a, rushing stream, set up your tent, watch the stars, that's a really good day.
I love that. I'm gonna have to try some snowshoeing.
Look,
Well,
you come out here, I'll go with you.
don't tempt me.
I got an extra pair.
I have a reputation for showing up when people make
You
offers
just
like
tell me
that. So,
when.
okay,
All we have to do is make sure that we've got good snow out there and you'll love it.
I will
And
do
then we'll
that.
go to Bojo's and get a big, thick pizza. Oh,
Hmm.
perfect day.
Twist my rubber arm.
Perfect day.
A previous guest left a question for a future guest. I won't tell you who asked this question just yet, but here's the question. Um, what's the biggest non-challenge that you realized you were spending too much time on?
Non-challenge that I was spending
Yeah, realizing you were focusing on something that didn't need focusing on, I suppose is the best
it's
way.
personal or business. Do you
Personal or
care?
business, yeah, it doesn't matter.
I spend a ridiculous amount of time on fantasy football. It, and it's bad. It's bad. There's a group of us, I've been in a few leagues, but there's a group of us like, and John's one of them. We're like, hey, what's the weather like in Wisconsin? I need to find out how I'm going to set up my roster. I mean, kidding aside, the funny thing about it is, um, I also like I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I need these things, I realize, to just sort of take my mind off, like repurpose it for a little bit. Because, if you do love what you do, you could think about it all the time. My dad was wired this way, and he didn't have as much balance um, as I want in my life, where I'm a little more rounded out. But I have those tendencies, like this is all I think about, this is all I do, and I just don't. I want to have a little bit more balance,
Mm.
and so I think that's where it comes from. But yeah, it's not healthy.
I may have to use that information for blackmail at this point because I feel like the next time I actually need to get your attention, as opposed to the 3-day SLA on a text response, I might just invoke a question about fantasy league choices, and then you might be like, "I need to answer this question."
You could send me I'm thinking about, who should I start, who should I sit? I'll answer at 3 in the morning. I promise you. What about for you? I know you've got music in your blood.
Non-challenge. I in the recent years, and I for not for a second am I evangelizing this because it's a purely and deeply personal thing. But my wife and I really got off of the train of keeping up with the Joneses, and we learned, I figured out that there was this interesting lifestyle creep thing that happens. Um, I don't know, it's maybe a human nature thing, maybe it's not, but I started reading and studying stoicism for the last couple of years, and this has really changed my mindset on a lot of these things, material things, and what's actually important in life. Again, a function of age, maybe. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about where do I want to spend my time, and what is money for, if it's not to create experiences, for example, is kind of the where this focus has gone, is really experiential living more so than material living.
Hmm.
And so that's something that I feel like has changed in the last few years for sure.
When you think about the experiences that draw you, does it become like a travel thing, or do you define experience in a different way? Like you're going to go to an event that you would not go to, like you know, whatever.
As
Monster trucks. I got to go to a monster truck match. I've never gone to one. Let's do it.
I've never been to a monster truck match. That's not on my list of buckets, items to
Of
try and check
experiences.
off. But I will say, like, and I have this conversation regularly because we're many of us in the channel are road warriors, and we travel quite a bit. And I feel like some people just don't get like the appeal of the travel to a certain extent. But I traveled a lot from an early age, and I now see sort of the opportunity to infuse perspective and experiences in life for my kid through the lens of travel. And so I'm fascinated by travel, and maybe there's so much of the world that maybe we think we know from a very superficial level, but that I want to like experience more deeply, more realistically. The long travel is something that I feel like we want to do. Spend 3 months in a place, not 3 days. In 3 days, you're just
When you do
rushing.
that, would you do that with a work blend, or are you thinking of it in the context of when you're not working?
I've thought about this a lot too. Like, would I have the capacity to turn the work off? In fact, years ago, I asked on LinkedIn if I had this idea that work-life balance seemed like a contradiction. Because to me, like, I love what I do. I'm very passionate about the intermingling of work and life, and how it shows up overall. And so I don't see them as separate things. And so I don't know that I could extricate work from life, in my later years. I'd have to figure out, how to fill that bucket of excitement and purpose and things to do. I'm not sure that I'd be cut out for sitting on a porch watching, the sunrise and the sunset and then napping in between. But I understand that's for some people, but I don't know that it'd be for me.
Yeah, that's something I do want to work on, is that I have a mindset that can be um, compartmentalized. Like, I'm working now, and then when I'm not working, I'm on vacation now. A blended state, sometimes mindset for me, because when I think about the things that we do, I like to have like get really immersed in it. So I'm not really good with do that and then break away and you know go do something fun in the middle of a day. I really am not good at that. And I'm like, okay, could I be good at that? Do I want to be good at that? Or maybe what I do is like like if I went on that trip with you and I was in the cabana next to you, I probably would say, all right, I'm going to work for this period of time, and then I'm not going to work for this period of time. And maybe there's something in the middle where you're like, all right, I might take a call at this time, but the dominant part of that day is one of those buckets or the other bucket. I think that's kind of how I would do it.
Man, I think in the context of a spouse is where these things maybe clash a little bit. And there's this expression I love so much. It's uncommunicated expectations become premeditated resentments, and I take that to
Oh,
heart. I love that one, and it's the kind of thing where if you're on a trip with a spouse and you realize you can't necessarily put the phone on cellular mode off for the 7 days because you got to work a little bit. I think communicating the expectation is the critical piece to making that work successfully, and not
yeah.
just being in your own island of your needs and trying to, manage your context switching and your focus switching and all that. But it's the things we learn along the way, though, right? So I love that.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I hope you can do that. Well, I got a question for you. For the stoicism, how does stoicism affect the experience thing?
Yeah, so Stoicism is rooted in these four values: courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. And I think it started for me when I picked up a book called The Daily Stoic by Rand Holiday.
Oh, I've
Um,
heard about that. Yeah.
and I wanted to like have a it was one of those year end New Year's goals type of thing. I wanted to do something the following year, but I didn't want it to wear off by the 15th of January like like the gym memberships do. But and so I was thinking, what could I do for the whole year that would kind of take a little bit of effort, some habitual behaviors and so on. And so I picked up this book because specifically you're supposed to read a daily passage every day, and the idea was it would expose you slowly to all these stoicism concepts over the entire year. And so I took it a step further, and I actually started transcribing the book every day, every morning. It's one of the ways that I learn is taking, written notes, and here's our notes on today, for example. But it just helps me remember concepts and ideas a little bit better. And so I started transcribing, and before I knew it, the end of the year had come along, and I literally transcribed this entire book of 365 pages because there's a passage for every day. And suddenly I was kind of living through some of those ideas unconsciously. And I thought, this is so great. And so I started paying a little bit more attention. And now I've actually written a keynote or workshop that I want to try and deliver to the channel that is kind of rooted in a bit of this concept of stoicism and the four values, and how to use some of this as a lens for how you create some of your guiding principles at your MSP, or how you bring people onto the behavior, the spectrum, and the things. The duty of care is really kind of the lens that I was thinking about with stoicism. So it just shows up in interesting ways. A lot of people, I think, have a very premeditated sense of what stoicism is. They say stoicism is just a lack of emotion, but it's so much more than that. It's really more being in control of your emotion and how you react to things, letting the things you can't control kind of be. And I think experientially, to answer your question, is you're less worried about all the factors that you can't control, and so this naturally just helps you be in the moment a little bit more. And I think
Yeah.
that's been a key unlock of experiences, is to be able to be in the moment without all these, things influencing how I think, or whether I can change something, or being affected by, the driver that cut our taxi driver off, that kind of stuff. And so overall, it's been a very freeing, I would say, is the best part of it.
That's cool. When you said that, I was thinking, to be in the moment is, there's a personal benefit to it, but I think it also applies to, like you said, a business context. Like, as we're talking about needing to shift to a new model that might allow the technology to be and do what it does, so that your shift in attention is going to be being present and understanding of your customers' needs, their problems, how they compete, being really focused on that, present about that. I think that it transfers into other areas of the way you work or the way you live. And I could see that. If you think about it, it's like right now, if we get stuck on the tech, maybe I miss what my customer said about how they really compete, where
Mhm.
they win, what the problem is they want to solve right now. There's applicability to what you're saying. I could see
Yeah.
for, somebody who's trying to, grow their firm and differentiate themselves along the way. Because I think
Yeah.
that, as we talk about it, I think that the relationship part of that is still going to be that powerful piece. Scott had mentioned this, and it caught my attention because I thought he was going to say, but technology, um, with where it can go, what does that do to the human relationship? And he's like, it amplifies the importance of it. To be good at those skills are going to be the lasting skills, the skill that keeps your customer from leaving you because they know that you understand them. And that applies to personal relationships too, I could see.
I agree. I agree. Ryan, man, I know that you want to get back to the kitchen to have some collisions, and so I'm going to
With a cookie.
I'm going to cut us off. You've been more than generous with your time today, and I genuinely look forward to catching up in person for the next brotherly hug at some channel event. So thank you so much, man, for your insights, your knowledge, your wisdom, and being so generous of spirit. I so appreciate your time always.
I was really looking forward to this, Luis, and please take my apology. It took way too long for us to bring this together, but I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.
All right. Well, folks, this is Ryan Walsh, Chief Strategy Officer at Pax8. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Ryan. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also find us on the ScalePad YouTube channel at Go ScalePad, is that, or just at mspconfidential.com. And we'll see you at the next one. Until then, thank you so much. Ryan, hang out backstage for a second. I'm going to kill the stream, and I'll be with you in just a moment. See you, everybody.
That sounds great. See you, everyone. Thank you.